Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. Today we'll be covering how to cost-effectively get energy and billing data from 1,000 metered locations. This webinar is hosted by Urjanet and is featuring Cox Enterprises and Groom Energy. My name is Eric Becker. I'm with Urjanet and I'll be the moderator today. Also joining me is Robert Ferry, the Director of Energy Procurement for Cox Enterprises, where he's responsible for over $100 million in annual energy spend spread across 32,000 different utility accounts, and also Paul Baier. Paul is a well-known industry analyst, perhaps best known for his work on the enterprise smart grid framework. In terms of an agenda this afternoon, I'll provide a brief introduction into Urjanet, and then Robert will join us to talk about his experiences with the Cox Energy Reporting Project, the challenges that he faced, how he overcame those challenges, the results of the initiative, and then just lessons learned. And then Paul will have an opportunity to come in and talk about the costs associated with obtaining energy data, and also share with us the results of a survey that he recently performed with corporate energy managers, and provide an overview of the enterprise smart grid framework. We'll also have a chance for Q&A at the end, so as we go through the presentation today, I encourage you to submit questions in the chat window, and then at the end of the session today, we'll be answering those questions. So in terms of an overview of Urjanet, the problem that we solve is fundamentally around the challenge of data acquisition. Obviously, data is critical to any energy-related project. Without good data, the analysis is flawed, and with flawed analysis, the wrong actions are taken. So we're focused in this area, and when we talk to customers about it, what we find is that information is difficult to get. And even if they're able to get the information, we find that it's inaccurate or incomplete and definitely expensive. You can see here that Paul's highlighting that sometimes the total cost of a project data acquisition can sometimes represent up to 50% of the overall project cost. And so the reason that the customers have these challenges with the data is that today most processes around data acquisition rely heavily on manual data entry processes, and that's what causes these challenges. Urjanet solves this problem. We're the first company to build a scaled technology platform that actually goes out and aggregates energy-related data electronically. We've built a platform that integrates with over 800 different utilities at this point to gather both invoice data and advanced metering data, also known as interval data. And we've integrated with 5,000 different weather stations to pull weather data into our platform. Once this data is in our platform, we run it through a series of computerized audits to ensure the data is clean and accurate. We normalize it to account for all the differences in the disparate data sources that we're aggregating. And then we deliver our customers a simple electronic data feed, a feed that they can plug into their various back-end applications, accounting applications, energy management applications, and others, or plug into the applications that our partners are providing to the marketplace. Urjanet is fundamentally a data company. We've got 4 different data services that we offer. Utility Connect, which delivers our customers their invoice data. Meter Connect, which provides access to interval and AMI data. Weather Connect, which is a source of not only weather data, but also a facilities sensitivity index to weather. And then finally, Alert Connect, which provides our customers with access to usage and billing anomalies. That's the overview of Urjanet, and now I'd like to hand it over to Robert to describe the project that he ran at Cox.
Thank you, Eric. Thought I'd just spend a quick minute talking a little bit about Cox Enterprises if you're not familiar with our company. We're based here in Atlanta, Georgia, over 100 years old, and we're a leading communications, media, automotive services company with revenues around $15 billion and more than 60,000 employees. And our 4 major divisions are Cox Communications, Cox Media Group, radio, television, newspapers, Mannheim Auto Auctions. We have around 65 locations across the U.S., Canada, and Autotrader.com. Our role in energy procurement here at Cox is to elevate deregulated market awareness for all our divisions and locations, provide them visibility and transparency to what's going on in the market. We collaborate with our other departments and subsidiaries. We want to be a dependable resource for energy information for all decision makers out in the field, increase free cash flow, and optimize our assets. And data is key to all of this. You know, the challenges that we faced, we had volume of over $100 million in annual spend on electricity and natural gas, 32,000 separate accounts across 310 utility providers. The majority of these accounts are the smaller power supplies that are part of our cable system. If you think about a neighborhood, or if you go down a street and you see boxes mounted on poles, in your neighborhood you see pedestals, those are the power supplies that I'm referring to. And we may have anywhere from 1,800 to 2,000 of those in a given utility. The inefficient data collection practices, you know, when we started out, we had to contact each location across the U.S. for data, and we had manual entry into spreadsheets, and the results, we always were falling behind with time-consuming collection process. It was prone to data entry errors. Our data wasn't current. It was a very static process. So once we got through a number of different locations, it took us a couple of months to do that, and then we were behind. There was always a lag. And limited visibility in consumption and pricing. So the objectives that we set out with in our energy reporting project is to eliminate the manual data entry, to create an automated data feed to collect, reconcile, analyze, and report on energy consumption and costs. We wanted connectivity into our in-house energy dashboard, which we built. Our business intelligence group here at Cox Enterprises built that for us. Deliver highly accurate data, flexible solution that scales as we needed it, making data available company-wide, a cost-effective approach to having energy data housed in this dashboard, and to create a view of current consumption spending, as well as an accurate view over time. We evaluated many systems, but several of them had flaws. There was no connection to our energy dashboard. It was important to us to build a dashboard that had the information that we wanted to house. Kilowatt hours, demand, all those things that you would look for as determinants. They were mostly bill payment providers, and that wasn't a solution that we were looking for. Ultimately, the vendors wanted to put us in a model that really wasn't helping us meet our primary needs. And ultimately, we chose Urjanet's Energy Data Service because of its service quality, flexibility, and cost. So now, how do we operate today? Here's a overview of the process. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide that you're collecting from thousands of utility accounts at the meter level, and they provide an FTP file to us 2 times a week. It goes into the energy data warehouse. It's a Hyperion S-base type platform that the business intelligence group here at Cox manages. We can also put financial data, business metrics around each of our divisions, as we want to look at different information, cost per square foot, around the number of subscribers, or maybe the number of cars sold through our auctions. And then on the right-hand side, that's just a snapshot of one of our dashboard screens. This is a project that we worked on, and it was around power supply optimization. And when you think about thousands of accounts and trying to get visibility and an overall view of what it looks like, it's very difficult to do unless you have a tool and data like Urjanet provides us. And so We partnered with our Cox Communications partner here with our department and Cox Communications that was looking at the power supplies in all the various markets, and we helped them prioritize where to focus their attention. And along the way, we also found that there were better rates, better approaches as to purchasing energy in each of these markets, and we migrated to these new rates and saved our company quite a bit of money. Energy rate analysis is another feature of the data. This is just some examples of Tucson Electric Power, information that really jumps out at you. And we noticed that there was a large account, had a lot of kilowatt hour consumption that was on the wrong rate, and we immediately switched that and saved close to $80,000. And you'll see a lot of TOU conversions. When you look at our profile of our power supplies, it's a very flat load shape, very high load factor, and so these time of use rates, as these utilities put in the smart meters, match up really well for us, and we're able to save the company quite a bit of money by migrating to those time of use tariffs. And this is just an overview, account detail, and we can slice and dice the information in many different ways. And the nice thing about it too is not only can we get this information in our energy and engineering group here in Atlanta, but we can also give access to any of the facilities managers, CFOs, anybody in our company who needs this information and access to it. And here's just an example of a custom report that we ran for our Virginia facilities. The carbon footprint overview, greenhouse gas reduction, sustainability is a big part of what we do here at Cox. Our overall goal is to be carbon neutral by 2030, water neutral by 2030, and zero waste to landfill in the next 7 to 10 years. So to have all this information housed in one data warehouse and to be able to track the carbon footprint for each of our subsidiaries and in each of our markets is very important to us. Some of the lessons learned: automation isn't just a matter of convenience. Be more strategic and get out of the data management business. Not only saves us time, but it gives us access to data weeks, even months faster. Ensure buy-in from executive team on KPIs. Be clear on what those KPIs are that will be tracked, improving energy efficiency, tracking the carbon footprint, etc. And don't only focus on the front-end reporting tools. Data is really the foundation of any of these tools that you'll use. And involve other departments. Energy data is used by many departments. Involve them as early in the project and take advantage of the economies of scale.
Thanks, Robert. That's a great overview. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Baier. I'm with Groom Energy, and always love hearing case studies from companies like Cox that really make real the challenges that we continue to see out in the marketplace for really implementing corporate-wide and energy management programs. For people who aren't familiar with Groom's Energy Services firm, but we also offer a focused set of services around the vendor research and requirements development and really corporate energy management team support. So we've seen a lot of different companies think about corporate energy management, buy different variety of problems, and buy different solutions out there. And certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, by far the biggest lesson we continue to hear is the cost of getting energy data. Again and again and again, we see teams assume that because they have a $20 million investment in the SAP program or because they're have a very sophisticated supply chain that certainly all our energy use as well as our cost data is easily retrieved from our current financial systems, and that's just rarely the case. And as Robert mentioned, without good data, it just doesn't matter what the output is. So we encourage the folks on the line here who are just thinking about just starting their journey is to really think through exactly the types of data you're getting into and exactly where and the procurement cost and time and dollars of actually getting that. When we talk about data, what are we really talking about? In our simplistic model, there's really two basic types. There's certainly the monthly utility bill data that we're all familiar with. It shows up often on paper bills. They have the full cost, energy use information and rates and demand charges and others. And there's a variety of set of interval data. An interval could be 5 seconds to 15-second interval data coming off a number of different types of meters. One of the more common ones are interval data from your main utility meter. That may be coming back to you as a receiving organization from the utility. Typically, it's anywhere between 1 and 4 days delayed, depending on how sophisticated the company is. We're certainly seeing an increase in companies potentially have access to that with these increased rollouts of utility smart meters, although we actually continue to see a lot of frustration on how quickly that data is actually getting used by the end user company rather than just the utility for their program optimization. Another source of interval data is from main meters, kind of real time. These are typically meters put on the utility main either by a demand response vendor or the company itself. The great information about this is you can get that near real time right into your corporate energy management software tool of choice. And the Cox example, as we've heard, they built their own. There's dozens of them out there in the marketplace. But that's obviously a critical tool for starting to understand some of the energy anomalies and energy savings opportunities in operations. And as you get more advanced, increasingly you get interval data from specific loads. These might be submeters for lighting or specific chillers or furnaces or work areas in a factory, as well as some of the local on-site generation capabilities out there from wind and solar and others. Some of the lessons we continue to see the companies learned, they have gone down this they continue to prioritize the business imperative and the use cases. One of the common things we see is an organization not aware of energy, kind of moving to energy awareness, often because of external pressures or because of a new CEO and management team or because of rising prices out there, or because they really have a greenhouse gas reduction goal that the boards realize that's really energy reduction is a way to achieve that goal. But when you take the next step from there, we really see that's where the divergence of requirements we're seeing out there. Some companies tend to focus more on the reporting requirements, which tend to be more utility-based. Some spend a lot more time with the facility managers and operations, which really want the interval data that's more costly to get, but has more operational impact for behavioral changes. So really understanding and literally prioritizing what exactly are we trying to accomplish here in our phase 1 and phase 2 is critical. If you haven't started with utility bill data, it's clearly a foundational element out there. We've seen a number of companies have invested initially in interval data solutions and not having a tie back to a financial number, which obviously finance and senior management speaks. And that's actually slowed some of the buy-in in those programs. So make sure, if you don't have already, have a clear foundational layer of utility bill data across all your, certainly your major facilities. And then we see increasingly companies moving this interval data for certain facilities where they can justify the ROI, and there's actually a team there that will take that insights and actually go and turn the wrench or check on a HVAC system that may be fighting itself, or check on to see if lights are really being left on inadvertently at night and wasting electricity. And through through these first three things, you can then really then start prioritizing what exactly are the data you need, where specifically it is, what's a cost-effective way to get the data. It's not trivial to get interval data from some of the utilities if they don't have programs set up already. We applaud efforts like Green Button, although we have not seen those type efforts to be really effective in terms of meeting the corporate needs for data from utilities. So services like the Urjanet ones are, in our experience, just critical in terms of releasing and reducing some of the cost and friction of getting data from dozens, if not hundreds, of utilities to your energy management software tool of choice. So I'd share a few more things. We did a large survey of 158 corporate energy managers of companies with $1 billion or more in sales early this year with Green Biz, and I just want to share a few of the highlights with everyone on the call here. The first one was one of the questions we asked: what were the top 2 KPIs? Obviously, everybody wants to reduce energy, but really translating that into what exactly are the KPIs that really going to drive the business case, really going to drive maintained senior management support and energy ownership and energy accountability in this program. And we're big believers in KPIs. And here are the top 2. The dark green lines are with companies with over $1 billion. Certainly, energy intensity by facility was one that we consistently see across many different sectors, if it's per store, per warehouse, or per car in manufacturing sector. And overall energy costs year to date compared to last year in dollars were the top 2. And if those haven't been established, we encourage the teams to think through, get buy-in from your finance and management team, and then think through kind of right to left thinking on what exactly are the data we need to make sure that we're getting good, accurate KPIs that can be defensible, that can be easily tracked, that tie to budget owners, divisions, products, whatever makes sense for your organization. The other question we asked were, what were the top features that any companies are looking for in their, we call enterprise energy management software, so tool that helps support your energy program across all your facilities and your assets. And the top 2 were, not surprisingly, managed utility bill data, which is the second one here. The ability to track energy projects is one that we continue to see is really a request by many companies. So when you have that goal and now you've got your baseline established, the next natural question is, great, what are we doing today to reduce energy use, to improve our KPIs, and are we on track? And that's really important, a part of actually making sure these programs really move forward in a meaningful way. Last thing I'll leave here before we move to question is Enterprise Smart Grid Framework. This is a framework we came up with about 1.5 years ago from requests from a lot of different companies that were really struggling with market confusion. So if you look at the market today, and as many of you probably in the call today, you're already getting, next slide, Eric, please, hundreds of calls, certainly dozens of calls from many different vendors that have energy management solutions, energy management software, energy management partner. We track on our website today over 200 companies that have various different pieces of this. It's a very confusing space in general because of the language. It's also confusing because so much of the underlying technology is flowing over from one traditional space to another. So traditional utility bill management vendors now have EMS software. Traditional demand response vendors now have an EMS offering. Companies that started as carbon management companies have morphed into companies that often offer EHS capabilities and others. And unfortunately, we're going to see this continue. The proliferation of technology continues. What used to be lighting control vendors are becoming IP control systems in the company. And I know the desire by many companies is certainly to have fewer systems But certainly in our view and our experience to date is that we're going to live in a very heterogeneous system, IT system here for the next 5 to 6 years. So the Enterprise Smart Grid framework was something we came up with to really just help piece through both the requirements and then categorize the vendors in this confusing space. And the model is pretty simple. It really starts on the left talking about the smart grid, which we really believe is a lot of discussions about the utility smart grid. And the utility smart grid obviously flows electricity and natural gas and steam and others to the utility meters. And on the right-hand side are the consuming pieces of it, both the home smart grid, which were not shown, and the enterprise smart grid, which is really the kind of virtual four walls of your company or organization. And critical within that is really start thinking about and understanding loads. That obviously is what drives usage. It's what's going to drive efficiency. And it's one of the key areas that we see missing in a lot of the industry discussion. There's too much focus in our views on the smart meters. There needs much more focus on industry and facility specific loads and what are tools to improve those. Within this enterprise smart grid, we'll go through this quickly here, but our simple model is really thinking about 3 areas of it: visibility into your energy spend and cost, control and visibility. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see in the blue, there's your services and load. On your middle column in the bottom is visibility. That's really what Robert walked through with Cox, both getting visibility mainly into utility bills and the pricing and tariffs. Above the middle section is control with visibility. So this is a lot more load-specific requirements and tools, and in some cases, it may even make more sense for companies to focus their initial efforts on, a network BMS system if you're a large big box retailer, for instance, instead of an overall corporate energy management system. But we're finding more control and visibility needs, and vendor solutions are highly specific to the underlying load. So what works well in a data center are a different set of vendors that work well with lighting and work well with HVAC loads. And then naturally, both your control visibility solution and your visibility solution need to have management integration, need to work with and support your existing set of management processes that are certainly obviously mature. Most organizations now on enterprise carbon and EH&S management, procurement. But the top right box is this new area that's emerging out there of enterprise energy management. It's really combining the bill tracking, the interval tracking at select facilities, as well as carbon tracking and the energy management, energy project tracking. We'll go to the next slide. Here's a visual representation for some of the leading vendors we're finding in different categories. We actually published a report that's based on, I think it's 40 or 50 different vendor demos as a tool to help, at least as a beginning point, to help companies come up with a subset of vendors to start considering here. So we're seeing here in the different boxes are certainly vendors that have a very strong functional strength in these 11 different functional areas in the second and third columns. Some of them often have offers in other, but these are certainly a good place to start. And I think what we're going to continue to see is lots and lots of companies start with the basics, getting visibility, particularly into utility bills across all their facilities that we've seen with Cox Enterprise, using tools like Urjanet to get that data more cost effectively into the systems here, adding sub-metering and monitoring where it makes sense, and then for certain loads at certain facilities, moving towards some of these specialized solutions. So just to kind of wrap up here, just a word of advice or word of continued lesson is it really doesn't matter how the fancy the graphics are in different solutions you're looking at. That, as the old adage says, garbage in, garbage out. It really needs to be accurate data. Data is not easy to get, so there's both a data capture problem, there's a data timeliness problem, there's a data completeness problem, which means both price and quantity. and then there's a data relevancy problem, making sure that this data is coming in is now actually tied to cost centers and budget owners and facility owners that actually can take action on it. So tying all these things together, we continue to see as the imperative for successful corporate energy management projects.
Okay, thank you, Robert and Paul. So just wanted to provide a summary of some of the takeaways from the session here this afternoon. I think, first of all, as we've seen, especially in Robert's presentation, that getting the executives engaged early on in developing and taking ownership of some of the KPIs is really important. And then as the project moves on, keeping those key stakeholders involved. And here I think an engaging reporting application, one that's easy to use and easy to draw useful insights from, is an effective way of keeping those key stakeholders involved throughout the life of the project. We also talked about how important the underlying data is, that must be current and accurate at all times to do a proper analysis. And then finally, we talked about the importance of using an automated tool to get to aggregate data, that getting rid of manual processes will lead to a more cost-effective way to aggregate data and much better data that's richer and more accurate. So those are the key takeaways from the session today. We have quite a few people that have joined us for the session, and there's a bunch of questions I'd like to see if we can get to. Robert, first for you, there's a question that's been posed, and that is, do you see Cox Enterprises moving to interval data in any of your facilities? And if so, why or why not?
You know, we certainly do, and we've done that in a lot of locations already, and really just a couple of examples of how we use it. Demand response is one. If any of you have been approached by some of the demand response providers, you need to commit to some level that you can reduce your demand when called upon. And what we like to do is take the interval data, look how we're running our operation, sit down with our facilities, and see exactly what we can commit to do. If it's a 50 horsepower air compressor, 30 kW lighting, it really gives us a lot of visibility with the interval data as to what we look like on a summer day that we're full out in operation. So we use it for that. And the other thing is capacity and transmission costs continue to rise in many markets. We like to know, when are we hitting these levels, these unforced capacity obligations that we're setting? When does that happen? Can we do anything to affect it and reduce it? So I think interval data is really key to both of those things. Okay,
great. Thank you, Robert. The next question here, I think this is directed towards Urjanet. What is the process of converting the monthly utility bill data into flat file import, and are PDFs of the original invoice available? And the way the Urjanet service works is that we've built electronic connections to, as I mentioned, over 800 different utility providers. All those providers are providing data in generally different formats. So one of the really hard problems that we've solved with our platform is we preserve the original source fidelity for all the different data that we're pulling into our platform, yet we're able to normalize it and deliver our customers a simple integrated data feed. That data feed is available both in a standard XML format or CSV file format, and formats that can also be customized. And so that is really a function of the platform. And then the PDF bill images are part of our data feed. So not only do the customers get the data that we've been able to extract from the providers, but also in that feed, they get a link to the original bill image. So hopefully that answers that question. And then, Paul, I have one here for you that's been posted. What do companies do when they don't have an automated solution like Urjanet for aggregating energy data?
It's a good question, Eric. It's been a perennial problem. We've seen a couple different approaches. One is the do-it-yourself approach, where we'll push down responsibility and try to get local finance or accounts payable team members to actually input not just the bill, but also the other information about cost and usage and demand charges. That approach historically has not worked well, although we certainly see some companies doing that. Secondly, we've seen some companies develop their own teams to actually start putting this in. We've seen a handful of examples of that. We don't recommend that, but certainly an approach that some have taken. Third, we've seen the approach of using traditional utility bill payment vendors that they're out there that historically will take your bills. They have a service center that manually puts them in. You'll then get a data feedback from typically a month, and then optionally will pay for that services well. And the fourth scenario we've seen out there is that some companies have abandoned their effort after a while when they realize it's actually too costly to get utility bill data for, in one case, it was 300 facilities around the world. So it is a perennial problem that services like Urjanet, certainly for the U.S. facilities, are a welcome tool in the toolbox.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And then, Robert, here's another question that I believe is directed to you, and that is, how does the data that you're collecting today support those and other departments like facilities at Cox?
That's another good question. You know, we've found so many ways that this really helped not only our facilities managers but our AP departments. You know, they have access to the dashboard. We can set it up, give them credentials to you know, sign in, and they look at bills. There's PDF files that are you know, housed in the cloud, and they can download those, print those. Our facilities managers, when they're looking at the charges that are coming through for their site, then they can go and look at bills, and it gives them a lot of information, and it's readily available, and we get a lot of good feedback from our locations across the country.
Okay, great. And then here's a question that was posted again, I believe, about the Urjanet data service, and that is, do all utility vendors supply electronic data? The answer is no, not all the utility vendors yet, although most do, and the trend is certainly that way. I mentioned that we've integrated with about 800 different utility providers. Up till now, that represents approximately 80% of all utility accounts across North America. When it comes to interval data, it's less available than, at least electronically, from the providers and billing data, but the trends there are also favorable as well. There's definitely a movement towards making that information available. Okay, and then Paul, a question for you. How do smart meters help solve all this need for information?
As we talked briefly, we see smart meters as a potential step forward, although certainly not really moving in a meaningful way. So if we kind of break the problem down a little bit, seamless, easy, cost-effective way to get utility bill data electronically from utilities, which is not smart meter data, it still doesn't exist in many, many utilities. Or if it does exist, exists on a count-by-count basis, and their parent, you know, give me all the utilities that relate to this hospital or this university or this company within the service area, is either cumbersome, expensive, or non-existent. So there's still a lot of work to be done just on getting the monthly utility bill data electronically delivered to end users. Smart meters don't help with that. Second, smart meters. I mean, there are you know, basically a flashing data that's coming off your main meter. That data is showing use data, but it needs to be tied to cost data as well. So we've seen a number of cases where, you know, you can get interval data, but it may not even have the account number if you pull it right off that pulse meter. May not have anything about the demand charges. So it's really just a tool for understanding how the main meter usage is changing. And then lastly, as we talked briefly in the presentation, energy use is really load specific. So knowing that there's 5 or 10% more load being used last night may or may not be a piece of useful information for that facility manager. That data really needs to be more load specific, needs to be normalized for facility or operations load, weather and other factors to really be operational.
Okay, great. And then Robert, a question that's directed at you. With so much information available on individual invoices, how do you determine which values to focus on for the purposes of calculating your carbon footprint?
Well, we just look at, all of those determinants that would go into calculating, carbon footprint. So, kilowatt hours, therms or decatherms of gas consumed. So those are the kinds of things that we pull off. But more importantly, we're able to, and that's one of the great things about the Urjanet data is we have some bills that are extremely complicated, have a lot of information, shoulder, kilowatt hour consumption, off-peak, on-peak, different demand levels associated with each of those, and all that information is important to us. So there's a lot of benefits by being able to extract that multiple determinants off of those bills.
Okay, thank you, Robert. And then here's a question I believe that's directed at Urjanet, and that is, how do you gather utility tax billing and late payment information? And the answer there is that one of the great things about the Urjanet service is that because we're doing this all through computer control, we actually gather all the data elements on the invoice. So in some cases, there might be up to 125 different data elements on a bill. We gather all that. So to the extent that includes tax information, late payment information, notices, everything, service addresses, all that information is available in the feed that we're providing. So I hope that addresses that question. And then let's see here. Paul, I think this question is directed towards you, and that is, if the customer is looking for information regarding demand and peak utilization, what's the best data source? How should they go about getting that type of information?
Well, certainly that's utility and often load specific. So really understanding what the utility tariffs and rate schedules look like. One of the things that we see that's important in that conversation is also make sure that it's quantified as well. We've seen a number of cases where even it could be a small changes in peak pricing or peak demand charges can really lead to significant savings. Plugging in the forklifts at 6 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock when the shift ends. In one case was a $70,000 change in a large DC. So really understanding that interval data and that specific location information is really where that information is specific.
Okay. Great. And then, Robert, this is a question that is around the goal you stated about landfill, and that is, how do you get information to track the progress you're making regarding goals you have in the area of landfill?
We have another portal or dashboard that tracks all of that information. And what we do is we start out with the baseline of what we're seeing in landfill now, and we have diversion targets over a period of years that we're working with our sites to divert material away from landfills. And it's all about recycling, reuse, repurposing these materials that are coming from our sites.
Okay. Great. And then there's another question directed at Urjanet, and that is, if the utility provider isn't one of the 800 with a pre-built integration, does Urjanet build the connection? That's a great question. Yes, we do. So If customers have utility providers they want us to integrate with, we're adding those all the time. So every week we're adding new utility providers. That's part of our standard. We're even adding providers outside of North America and Europe now. So that's just a natural part of our business, and especially if it's a key utility provider for a customer, we'll make sure that those happen first. And then, Robert, another question directed at you. If you're familiar with Energy Star Portfolio Manager, the question is, has Cox ever considered using that application?
Yeah, that's something we're actually starting to look at with a couple of states that are requiring that. And we have another group here, the Energy Conservation Group, so I know the ability to report into Energy Star and have all that information is going to be more and more important to us, and the Urjanet data and the dashboard gives us a lot of those determinants that we need.
Okay, great. Thanks. And this may be a question, Paul, that you can try to answer. And Robert, if you want to chime in at the end, that would be great. But the question concerns fuel. And that is, that information often isn't on a utility bill, but if you're interested in tracking fuel, how would someone go about doing that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So, yeah, certainly fuel is a critical energy source if you're tracking carbon or have a large fleet. And, from our experience across companies, sometimes there's a sophisticated fleet management where you actually can get the actual usage, depending on where the fleet fuel is used and refueled. Other ways is to do it off the obviously the mileage and the individual vehicles. And then for fuel that's used internally, fortunately, we've seen just manually have to go out and really check those bins because they aren't, or the tanks, they aren't always electronically monitored. But that's our experience. Robert, what's been your experience on fuel trackage?
Yeah, we have a large fleet with our Cox Communications cable system, and what we've done there is through fleet cards. So part of the service that they provide is to give us monthly reports, and it's very granular information. Cost per gallon, the type of fuel, the location, the amount. So there's a lot of detail, and we actually track that on a quarterly basis by division.
Okay, great. I hope that was helpful information for the person who's interested in fuel. There's another question that's been posted here, targeted at Urjanet, and that concerns our pricing model. Yeah, our service it's a subscription model where we sell blocks of transactions, and those transactions all revolve around the number of utility accounts that we're providing data for. So whether it's monthly invoice data or a month's worth of interval data for a particular account, it all revolves around account-based pricing and is sold as a subscription. Another question was posed for Urjanet, and that was whether we had integrations with utility providers up in Canada, and we do. So we've got a very strong presence across all of North America, and as I mentioned earlier, had begun doing work in Europe as well. And let me see if there's other questions that have been posted. I think that's it. So we had a large number of participants on the line today. I want to once again thank Robert with Cox and Paul with Baier. We are going to post a recording of this webinar and distribute it to those that have signed up for the webinar and post it on our website later. So once again, thank you for all the participants, and we hope to talk to you again soon.